So before you dive into an hour-and-a-half video, I figured it would make sense for me to give you some quick insights into it. So the first insight is what it is. And basically, I'll be building a vanilla CSS and vanilla JavaScript slideshow from scratch. And you'll see me build out the whole thing. This is unscripted, troubleshooting as I go. So it should give you some helpful insights in how you might go about building that or a similar component on your own. And I will be placing the code for this on GitHub, so I'll include the link for that in the description, but that should be github.com/nicholas-westby/videos, and there'll be a branch you can select for it. And then given how long the video is, you can probably just use the fast forward feature to speed things up a bit. I don't think I talk too fast, so 1.5, 2 times speed should be fine. And then I do mention a circular slideshow feature at some points in the video, but due to time constraints, I didn't get around to that this time. Hopefully in the future video I can get to that, but just a heads up, that's not included just yet. And then one other heads up is that there's some typing sounds that are picked up during the video, so that's unfortunate. Hopefully it's not too annoying. If you do know a way around that, I'm using Camtasia to record these. Just go ahead and let me know in the comments. That'd be very helpful for future videos. And then, as I mentioned, it's a slideshow, so that's the thing that's shown behind me. Let me go ahead and give you a better look here real quick. So here it is, the slideshow that I'll be building this video. It's got the left-right pagers, and then each slide has an image, a header, a summary, and a link, and it's got these little dots to show the current slide. So that's what you'll be building or seeing me building. Thanks. Hello world, we're going to go ahead and build a slideshow today. First step when building anything is to define requirements, and I'm going to serve as the designer for this exercise. So let's go ahead and open up a design tool. This video is going to be pretty long, so feel free to use the fast forward function. Alright, so I'm going to create a design here for our slideshow. Something pretty basic. Alright, so each slide will have an image. We'll represent that with this box here. And then each slide will have maybe a header, summary, and a link. Let's go ahead and find what we can do to make those. And we'll add a button. All right, so we've got the contents of one slide. Let's go ahead and add some controls. Let's see. Maybe we'll toss left and right pager arrows in there. Got our left one. You can tell I'm not actually a designer. And then we'll add some dots at the bottom. Sometimes the dots represent clickable elements, so you can click the dot and go to that slide, but in my opinion those are usually done pretty poorly and aren't very effective unless maybe there's a thumbnail or something of that sort. So these dots will just represent a view of which slide is the active slide. Let's add a few of those. Alright, we've got our pager dots. Then I'll make sure one is active. Let's do this one as the active one. Alright, so we've got our requirements down in terms of a design. We'd also want to define the requirements for functionality. So the way I see this working is that you can click the left or right arrows. It'll transition to the next or previous slide. And then if it gets to the end, it will loop back around. So this will be a circular slideshow. And then, yeah, as I mentioned, the buttons, clicking them won't do anything, but they will reflect which is the current slide. And there won't be an automatic transition either. That's typically something you don't want to do for accessibility reasons unless you also add a pause button to it. Yeah, that's our requirements. So I'll save this for later. And let's build it. I'm going to use JetBrains Writer. This is typically used for .NET projects, but we can also use it for front-end projects. And we're going to build this with the vanilla technologies too, by the way. So we'll just call this Slideshow. And then we'll go to File System View so that we can view front-end files. In Solution View, you're restricted to elements that are part of the solution, such as projects. Let's add a file. Let's make it an HTML file. We'll just call this Slideshow. There we go. Give it a title of Slideshow. Typically, you'd want to add a meta tag here for the viewport, but we'll skip that for now. That'll be where our slideshow goes. And Writer has this feature where if you mouse over to the top right of an HTML file, you can open it in a browser. There we go. We'll just adjust that so they're side by side. We'll add some other files while we're here. So a CSS file so we can add styles. And then a JavaScript file to control the functionality. Now let's see if my AI plugin is enabled. There we go. So just to speed things up a bit, I'll see if I can use the plugin to generate a bit of boilerplate for us. All right, let's see what it gives us. Looks like it's trying to do a little JavaScript for us, which we don't need. We're going to do things a little different than that. But in general, this looks okay. Let's go ahead and copy that. And before I paste it in here, I'm planning to make this a web component. The nice thing about a web component is that you can take that markup, place it anywhere on the page, and that component is then going to be able to attach things like event handlers without having to worry about doing a query selector all to find all slideshows on the page and then looping through them. It's also nice because then you can create that web component at any time. So for example, maybe you open a modal dialog and then some Ajax makes a call and then injects a slideshow. If you were doing it another way, you might have to then rescan the page, do another query selector all to find the slideshow. But with a web component, as soon as you insert that element, it's just instantly going to start doing its thing. So let's name it. So we'll just call this a general slideshow. It's probably complaining that I don't have the web component defined yet. Well, let's see what this does. I guess that's just a local setting that remembers that that's a web component. I didn't need all those squigglies, so let's turn that down a bit. And we still have our clipboard full of that boilerplate implementation. Pasting that in. Let's see. I guess we can do a couple levels of nesting. This is sometimes useful for container queries because you have to define the container type, and then within that you can define the container query itself with respect to that outer container. Alright, so we got some slides here, and they're using JPEGs. I think I'd rather them all be SVGs just for testing purposes, and I don't like that there's a width attached to each of these. Should be no inline styles. Same thing here with this text align. Let's see what this looks like though. Alright. Yeah, the dots wouldn't show up because they don't have size to them or any sort of visual styles. Everything else looks pretty much okay. But yeah, let's use our AI plugin to remove some of this stuff that we don't like. One little quirky thing I've noticed is that if you highlight all the way to the beginning of a line, and then do the AI plugin and then copy the code over, sometimes it moves that code from that line up to the prior one, so you'll end up with mismatched alignment. So what tends to get around that is you just select the beginning of the text on that line instead of the white space before it. So then I'll go ahead and ask a question about this. I'd like to remove all the inline styles, and I'd like to change each image from a JPEG to an SVG. There was another thing here I wanted to do. Ah, yes. And no inline JavaScript. Remove all JavaScript. We're going to build that ourselves later. Looks like it is doing the right things so far. All right, cool. Let's copy that over. Just save that. Each time I save, it should refresh, and I guess there was no visual changes, so nothing really changed over there. Okay, so let's see what we can do next. Oh, it did that thing I was talking about. I guess it just does that whenever it wants. Moves the next line up to the end of the prior one. All right, so let's see, we added okay, so I want to add some images. So I created image 1, 2, and 3.svg, so we'll go ahead and create those really quick. Care too much about these. Just do something basic. I think there's a gradient tool in here that lets you fiddle with some things. Rotate. Oh, interesting. Let's just see what happens when I do this. Okay. Looks good enough. Alright, so I'll just create a few of these. And we want to export actually. SVG looks good. We won't worry too much about folder structure for now. Then let's change one or two things. Okay, save our second one. Yeah, looks all right. cool. Got some images. Should probably install a window manager to tile these a bit better. Alright, we've got some images now. And before I style anything, I'm going to make less weird class names. So let's try C. Replacing these. This will just be called, let's just call this G slideshow, and then slide. Okay. That'll be our naming convention. Just copy some of this since I keep reusing it. Actually, I normally like to put images inside of picture tags because that's closer to what you would normally see on a website. So we may as well aim for that. Reason being so you can add sources and make it a responsive image. And for this summary, if this were being entered in a CMS, we might expect that there would be multiple paragraphs potentially. So we will wrap that. To better support a realistic scenario. All right. Now I've made a bunch of changes to this first slide and I want to apply them to the others. Thankfully we have some AI to speed that up. Interesting, it gave us just the second and third slides, so I guess we'll have to manually copy that. Looks like that's all about right. All right. Looks good so far. Let's adjust the rest of these classes here. I'd prefer buttons instead of anchor tags, since the clicking them doesn't actually go anywhere. And let's make something a little nicer to read. I also tend to put these inside of a wrapper div. Easier to position them that way some of the time. Can always change it later on if we want. All right, this markup's looking pretty good. I think you might want the pager dots and the pager arrows to be outside of the container that houses the slides, just in case for styling purposes, positioning the slides and whatnot. And I don't know what I want to call that yet, but we'll just leave it an empty div. Add a class to it later if we decide that we want to style that specifically. That looks good. Cool. All right, guess we'll take a little break and get back to adding styles and JavaScript later. All right, so now that we've built the markup, or at least the first draft of it, let's go ahead and add some styles. Let's see, link, I always forget this, the href? Do a little test, make sure I got that right. Guess not. Let's Google. Add that rel on there. There we go. Don't like that very much though. All right, so first thing I want to do is position the slides so that they're side by side. We'll worry about positioning them on and off the visible viewport later. All right, so we've got our slideshow container, and I think maybe we'll go with slide container instead, or just slides. Simplify that a bit. We get Flexbox. There we go. And let me think about that. I want each slide, let's say we want each slide to be 100% width. Let's go with this, maybe like 90% for now. Let's see, width. Yeah, what it's trying to do is just fit it all in one row. We don't want to do that. So what we might need to do is create an inner container and an outer container, where the inner container can be as big as it wants to be, and then the outer one allows hidden overflow. So let's just assume that here. We'll call this outer, maybe inner. And this one will be, how do we want to set the width of that? It should be just the natural width. So maybe we don't set a width. Let's do outer. Oh, this was the slides, so I guess that's, let's delete that for now. Typo. All right, so the inner, that should probably be display flex. The outer is overflow hidden. And these need to be reflected in the markup. So let's just call this one inner. Alright, so kind of the same position as before. Let's see. Still doing that thing. So we need this inner one to be bigger than the outer one. How do we want to, I guess we just make an arbitrary width. You know, maybe it's kind of right. Now those slides are relative to the size of this container rather than relative to the size of the viewport. Depends on what you want, but I guess we'll just, for testing, do viewport. There you go. So we can see 90% of this slide, and then there's a little bit of the next one. That seems about right. And then we want these contents of each slide to be on top of each slide image. So let's do that. Let's see, how is that going to work? Guess we want to clump all this stuff inside of a wrapper. That way we can position that on top of the image. Just call that slide info for now, for lack of a better term. And then again, we'll replicate that across the other ones. It's looking about right. Really gotta figure that out one of these days. All right, so we've got a little slide info thing. Suppose we'll do position absolute. I call it slide info. Then absolute position things need to be positioned relative to something else. So we'll go ahead and make that position relative to this slide. And let's give it some offsets. There we go. Right now we're letting the images determine the height of the slide. We could do that differently, maybe a fixed height, or let the text info decide the height and then position the image absolute. There's a few ways we could do it, but this is fine for now. All right, it's kind of close to the edge. Let's give it some padding. I suppose margin. And we might want to use some custom properties so we don't have to repeat ourselves. Because we might use that elsewhere. What doesn't it like? Guess it's just going to give me some squiggles without any extra info. Oh, there we go. Did I type something wrong? Maybe this root thing is not right. It seems to work. Try changing it. Oh, guess that's just writer getting confused. Perhaps WebStorm would work a little better. All right, so we got our slides looking okay. I think I'd like to find a better way to set the width of that inner container, but I'll figure that out later. So we got our buttons here too. The dots disappeared, didn't they? Oh, that's right, they never really showed up. So let's make sure they can show up. slideshow dot. Then we also want dots. Give it a gap. We could do like that, but if there's enough slides to stack these, then it might be good to have a vertical gap as well. There we go, got some dots. I like that I'm having to repeat myself a lot here, so let's add in the variable, call this dot size. We'll make them a little smaller. Then add some padding. Let's try padding. Let's see, I care about vertical padding for now, so let's go with, actually I'll use the default padding size until I find a better reason to change it. No horizontal padding. There we go, a little bit of a spacing there. And then let's see, I kind of want these arrows on top of the slides, but it's not an important detail. I'll leave them down there for now. But I will put them on the left and right. Well, yeah, let's do that. Good enough for now. We could make these buttons look fancier if we wanted, but we'll just leave them simple. Okay, I suppose we want to center these dots a bit. Let's do that. That's not what I want. Space around. I thought space around was added it to the start and end, but I guess not. I don't think I want to grammar check my CSS values. All right, let's see. There we go. That makes more sense. And now that I look at it, I'm actually not liking those arrows down there, so I think I will move them. But to do that, I think we're going to have to structure our markup a little differently. Because they should be positioned vertically centered where these slides are. So I guess maybe we'll do the outer one. Alright, so let's see if we can figure out how to position those. What are those called again? Slideshow pagers. Absolute, and then that means we have to set the parent that it's absolute relative to be slides outer. Then let's do top 50%, left 0, right 0, and let's do our padding again. Looks kind of weird, touched up to the edge. Okay, and then this top 50% will position the top of the pager arrows halfway down, but we want that to be nudged up by half of the height of the arrows themselves, so we'll do a transform. There we go, moved it up just a bit. Oh, I forgot to save that change for the center, the dots. Oops, wrong one. Let's find those dots, there we go. It's better. I suppose we'll pretend one of these dots is active. Center one. Using BEM naming here. The modifier on that being active. Slideshow.active. Fortunately, in plain CSS, you can do nested elements, but you can't combine a single class name. So we have to actually type that out manually. I've used this color in a couple places, so let's make that a variable. Or technically a CSS custom property. Let's just hide the syntax issues for now, since they're not really helping us. Cool, and we can just change that if we want. In the one spot. Cool, starting to look a bit like a slideshow. We'll have to figure out that container sizing issue later, but I think for now this will do. Alright, I think I may actually have an idea for handling the container issue, where I had to just arbitrarily set it to 300% of the viewport width, and I'd like it to just set based on the intrinsic size of the contents of the container instead. So I think what I'll do here, take away this width and set overflow scroll. Maybe just like scroll X, scroll, something like that, maybe. All right, and then width 100%. All right, now these slides are still not wanting to expand the outer container. Let's see if we can figure out that. Maybe it's because we're using Flexbox. Trying to fiddle with things, trying to figure it out. I don't really want to float them. Let's just do a bit of Googling to figure this one out. Let's see, so actually, you know what? We have a little AI helper. Let's see what they have to say. Seems like it's trying to suggest floating, basically. I did want to avoid that. says we want to have flex shrink 0 on the individual items. Hey, there we go. Who needs Google? And then I think there's also some styles we can use to hide the scroll bar. So although it's doing what scroll bars do, it doesn't need to be visible, but it might be jumping the gun a little bit. So the reason we want this scroll bar, other than to allow the slides to move, is that there's this JavaScript function we can call that will slide a specific slide into view. Like so, if I click next, it would then slide over here and show that one. And I believe that only works if you have this scroll set on the container. So now that we have that, we should be able to start working on the JavaScript. Let me just double check a few things here. Let's see. I don't know if there's a big reason for this outer container. I guess maybe it'll help with the arrow positioning. Probably don't want those arrows inside of the scroll section, so that can stay. Okay, cool. Yeah, I think we're pretty much ready to, one more thing. I want to make this text kind of inside, vertically centered a bit more. Let's try that out. All right, so those are slide info, and we're already positioning the absolute, so let's do top 50%, and we'll do our transform again to offset that. Cool, let's get a bit close to the arrow there. It might overlap some of the time, so we'll add a little padding to help with that. Guess we'll have to do a new padding variable. And we'll call this slide padding for now. And it doesn't need vertical padding. Alright, it looks like it's too high up. What's going on there? Interesting. This thing is bigger than it needs to be. Oh, because the bottom. Let's get rid of that. Looks better. Still a bit close to that button, so let's bump that up a bit. That's looking all right. And again, the 90% is just for testing. Later, we'll change that probably to 100%. Another thing that I'd like to see is a reset. So we could create a separate reset file. Maybe let's just do that to not mix up our styles too much. Didn't want to work. Let's just create a new one. Set a box sizing, something reasonable. That way when you're setting padding and borders and so on, the width accounts for that on elements. Don't get any weird calculations. Whoops. Yeah, maybe let's just remove some of that body padding or margin or whatever that is. Good enough. And I think those images, I'm not sure if they're resizing as they should. Maybe they are, but let's confirm that. Oh yeah, so 100% height auto. If we really wanted, we could set an aspect ratio to enforce a certain size, and then do what's that called, box sizing, to do like a contains or a cover in case the image aspect ratio doesn't match what it ought to. I think this is fine for now. Yeah, and then imagine if we click the arrow, it should come over here, and then click it again, comes over here, changes these dots. But we'll handle all that in the JavaScript phase, which we'll do later. All right, so I think I actually do want to change the image aspect ratio after all. It just seemed a bit tall. And so before I do that, I think I'm going to want to edit one of the images so that when I do change the aspect ratio, it's apparent where the edges of the image are, so that I can make sure I'm cropping it rather than changing or distorting the image in another way. And so to do that, I'm going to have to go to one of these images. And edit it. So I'll give it a box so I can tell where the edges are. Whoops. And then I'll put some text in the center so I can tell if things look distorted or not. Let's see, text. Okay. Alright, let's fiddle with some of these things. And, let's change the color. I don't want it to be too overwhelming, just enough to get a good sense of things. Alright, I think we're good, so we'll save that. Export, I guess. And we'll just create a duplicate in case we want to go back to the other one at any point. Cool, so now we'll make use of that image. There we go. You can see the full image in the center of it. And we'll do something a little different here. Let's use the inspector to try and adjust this first. Alright, so the images should have an aspect ratio of maybe 16:9. Alright, looks like it's set the aspect ratio. It's just kind of centering the image within it, and I think we probably want to do a cover instead. That's object fit. Alright, it's looking right. So the image is wider than it is tall, and it's cropping off the excess on the top and bottom. That's perfect. So just got to put that in code. There we go. All set now. Great, now we can move on to the JavaScript. So first thing I want to do is make a web component out of this. And it's a bit tedious to remember, so let's just see if we can get AI to figure that out for us. Interesting. I've not seen that message before. Maybe they configured AI Assistant to be restricted to the languages of the IDE you're currently using. Well, let's try WebStorm. Don't have that one installed yet. All right, to be continued. Alright, so I went ahead and installed WebStorm, and now hopefully we can do a little more fiddling with the chat there. Looks like it's trying to give us a full implementation. That's pretty neat. But that's not what we want right now. Alright, we don't want it to change the HTML, so get rid of that. Maybe we'll toss a console log in there. check on things. Make this a JavaScript module since that gives us some extra abilities, and it defers execution until the end of the document if I remember correctly. Let's see. I guess we have to reload that. Yeah, there we go. All right, so now that we've got the basics in place, we can start implementing it. Let's see, so first thing we want to do is capture some of these elements so that we can start fiddling with them. So we'll store those into some local variables here, and we'll create a function for that. So function will be called store elements. And we want it to store, I think we'll use data attributes because that's a little more reliable than CSS classes to fetch items. So we'll call this data. Actually, we don't need the parent. Let's do the buttons. Previous. Interesting. Just noticed WebStorm apparently resolves the encoded characters. So that's pretty cool. You click it and it shows the original value. And then let's see for the dots. I guess we can put the attribute on the dots. Let's try that for now. And then the slides themselves, we also want to be able to interact with via JavaScript. Cool, so we got the slides, we got the pagers, and we got the dots. And again, I'm just going to have the AI function implement this for me. Let's see, maybe it'll have the AI. Yep. That's good enough for now. I think though I'd like to define these variables up here. And I'd like to change the naming convention a little bit. Didn't seem to infer the pluralization and singular naming convention, so let's just ignore that. Good old refactoring. I'll just log those, make sure it got them. That looks right. Three slides, previous, next, and 3 dots. Let's see if we can get AI to comment this. We didn't quite need all of that. Just check on something real quick. Okay. Let's try that again there with this. Cool. So we've stored our elements, and now we want to do some things with them. First thing, I guess we'll try the buttons, maybe the next one, since we start with the leftmost slide. And I'm thinking we'll just implement it with the current set of slides, and then we'll worry about making it circular next after that. All right, so we want to attach events. Let's try this. I've not used this before. I should probably say click events. Maybe it'll be smart enough to figure that out. Yeah. Let's see if it all makes sense. Yeah. I think that looks good. And then this should not be an array of items, so let's change that. So let's think. When we click next, we want to know what the current slide is and then advance to the next one. So I think we'll just assume that the current slide is the first one, so index 0, and then we can store a variable to remember that from now on, or we can use a data attribute. I think, what do you think about that? Because I think later on we're going to want to do intersection observers to figure out what's visible. I don't know, maybe we'll just go with storing the index for now and then make it more complicated as needed. So let's just call that slide index. I'm going to go ahead and initialize variables here instead in case we need to do anything else that's within the context of the DOM elements. So put this here. I can imagine we might want to do that after storing elements. So let's say, oh, there we go. Nifty. Alright, so now we need to visually update it. I think there's a JavaScript function to slide and show the next slide within the container. So let's just figure out what that is. Alright. So the next element, so let's call it next element, next slide. And we'll get that based on the index. Okay, we want it to be smooth. I guess that's the container block. And then to the start of the container, so that all makes sense. We could also maybe center it or something if, I don't know if that's an option. Let's try this for now. Hey, there we go. So if I click it again, I should just get an error because there is no next element. Still console logging. Oh, maybe that's from the last one. Yep, there we go. Error. But yeah, that was pretty easy implementation for the next button. Let's do the previous as well. And maybe we'll toss a note in there to handle edge cases. We won't worry about things like if there's only one slide for now. Probably would just hide the buttons or something, and the dots. Let's see, so we want this same thing. In fact, these two implementations are going to be very similar, so maybe I'll create a function for that. So we'll call that advance to slide, which will do this stuff right here. Now all I gotta do is update a couple things. I feel like I had to click that button twice at first. Let's check on that. Oh, no, I'm good. I guess I need to just focus or something. Yeah, looks like we're in business. We've got a slideshow. We probably don't want that scroll bar though, so let's hide that somehow. We won't worry about cross-browser testing just now, but we'll put the styles in there that should work for them in theory. Alright, let's see what this thing is called. Slideshow inner. We should already have some styles for that above. There we go. Maybe we'll put them here. There we go. No scroll bar. The dots, updating them would be a good next thing to work on. But let's put a comment in here. We don't really care about IE anymore. All right, so dots. We had that active one. I think we can keep that. We can assume that whatever backend tools you're using are able to set that active dot on the first item when it's displaying the first slide. And for now, we're kind of assuming that there's one slide visible at a time. Later on, we'll make that a little more advanced and use an intersection observer in case there's, the slides are smaller and more can be visible at once. But we'll just use our index for now to figure this out. Interesting. Yeah, I didn't know there was a toggle function on that the class list. Let's just see what this is doing. So it's visiting each dot, toggling it based on the index. Okay, that's cool. I learned something. Let's change that class name though. And let's put that up here. Call that dot active class. And inside of initialize variables, we'll store that and use it here. Didn't seem to work. Maybe a made-up toggle. I don't know if that exists. Where's this console log coming from? Oh, there we go. Oh, that's right, I'm actually calling this now that I think about it. Let's do that. So probably when you advance to a slide, you're going to want to update those dots. Perfect. So now we have a usable slideshow. Maybe we'll change those widths to 100% instead of 90. Let's just see what that looks like. 100, keep our width. There we go. Imagine that function to advance the slider has a timing element to it. Let's see if that's the case. Where's that? There we go. Let's say we want it to take a fourth of a second, so 250 milliseconds. Oh, that sounds like a pain. Let's not worry about it. Seems pretty reasonable right now. All right, so I think maybe we'll take a little break since we've got a slideshow that's working. Those edge cases we'll have to handle, but I think we're going to get to a more advanced implementation where this implementation is going to be less relevant, so we may as well not worry about that just now.